Yeah, I appreciate that, and I apologise for interrupting you. It's just that word expert when I've heard, it's been a privilege to listen to two people.
It was in red too.
Yeah, in red. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it has. It's been an honour and a privilege to listen to those stories this morning. And I would like just to offer my respect to those people and to the stories that we've heard as I begin, really. So yeah, this is an opportunity. The changes in the legislation, everything that's going on, the new organisations, the people gathering, it's an exciting time for me. And to see that 400 plus people have thought that it would be good to come and think about together and learn together about keeping people safe is one of the most encouraging and positive things I could imagine happening. To see these sparkly eyes looking to make a difference, to making it better, and to righting some of the wrongs that have gone before in every country in the world throughout time, well, certainly throughout the recent centuries, is very, very encouraging to me. And I'd like to thank you for that opportunity to come and meet you all and to talk about some things that have been going on in different countries around the world. And that's gone off. There we go. Okay. So where do we start? Yeah, I didn't want to start with a joke, you know. But what I did want to start with was a story. There's a story that goes back to 1980 when I first started working around and alongside people with learning disabilities. And that was in a hospital called Cold East Hospital. And in particular, that was a large institution. It had about 1,000 people in it altogether. And in particular, there was B Villa, which was for women who were really quite distressed a lot of the time, many of whom had had a lot of traumatic experiences in their lives. And I was visiting this villa as part of my induction into life in the hospital. And I was shocked and struck by the sounds, the sights, the smells of that place. I walked in, there were 32 women living there. There were 2 members of staff on duty. The smell was almost overpowering. Many of the women weren't dressed and were making noises. Were seeking and hoping for some sort of love and attention and not able to find it anywhere. And I talked to the nurse. It wasn't her fault. It wasn't her. It was all of our faults at that time. And I talked to the nurse who was there, and she said, "This matters," she said, "if the women here are women. This matters if the people here are people." And I thought we would learn that when we close the institutions. But then just this weekend, there's been some stories in the UK about a young man. He's 14 years old. He needs to go in a taxi to school 30 miles away. You start wondering what that's about. And the local authority, not, again, all of our faults, this is not a social worker's fault at all. The local authority decided that really it would be okay if he had another person join him in that taxi. And that had added another half hour to the journey. And so these 2 children didn't get on very well. In fact, it really upset him to have this other person in his taxi. And so eventually, his mum, and we heard about mum still having to step in this morning, his mum had to give up work so she could take him to his school 30 miles away every day. That was the only solution. The politicians scrambled, of course, and they scrambled to say, let's review transport arrangements. And it just struck me, listening to that story on the radio, it struck me, that, well, let's review how we get to a point where we take decisions like that. How we lose the humanity of people. What happens that enables us and takes the humanity away from us and the people that we support and the people that we're alongside every day. And how can we keep that message of the basic humanity of all of us in the services that we're providing into the future through these opportunities for change. And then another thing I want to start with is the idea of hope. Okay, I love the sign for hope, which is this, isn't it? Is it in Nels Lang as well? Yeah. But this isn't about hope. It is hoping that things are going to get better and it's all going to be all right in the end. I've been reading a lot about hope recently because it's a very important part of my work as a psychologist. And what I've been reading about is saying that hope is actually something that you do, something that you construct and work on together. And this is an opportunity for us to work on hope together, that we have got what it takes alongside people with disabilities and their families and their supporters to make this better, to keep people safe and to get from here to a much better future. It's called reasonable hopefulness. And it's a really, really important concept for us to grasp. So humanity and hope, that's what we're doing. Okay, I need to skip on through. And yeah, again, this thing, there we go. Yeah. What we're going to do very briefly today is we're going to cover some introductions. I'm then going to talk about the introduction of individual budgets in the UK, what the plan was, what the outcome was for that, how that happened, and then talk to you quite a bit about some of the evidence that if we were starting again, we would use that evidence to base what we're going to do. And then remember why we're doing this and stay hopeful. Okay. So just beginning with an introduction very quickly, I live near the city of Hull, which you'll be glad to know is the UK City of Culture this year, which made quite a lot of people laugh because it's a rough old place, is Hull. Yeah. Those of you that know of it will be smiling away. Actually, it's been fantastic. It's also where William Wilberforce was born and lived. The man that was responsible, along with a lot of other people, for the abolition of slavery. So we know something about oppression too in Hull. And I work a lot in Stoke. Stoke is where your pots and, well, not pans, your pots come from. Many of the tiles and pots, Wedgwood and all that kind of stuff. It does also have canals, and it's also right at the bottom of all the league tables. I like being around places that's at the bottom of the league tables. Because there you find good people in my experience. So greetings from those two cities to this great city. Wow, Melbourne's fantastic, isn't it? Okay, what's going on here? Again. There we go. So, moving on to what the plan was. Well, the plan was to, and the most important thing that we do is to see people in context, okay? So what we begin with is we begin with the person, and the person has relationships with the important and everyday people around them, the supporters. That needs to be right to keep us safe. Then those people and the person have relationships with the wider system, and that is many of the people that are here, the people that are organising, planning, leading, setting up the care and support that people receive. Those relationships have to work too. And then more widely, the rest of society is the context for all that we do. The attitudes that there are to people with disabilities, whether or not it's seen as a priority amongst the wider group of society. And those relationships, to keep people safe, all have to work together and influence each other. So let's take each one and just see what the plan was with individual budgets and the move into different services, and then what the outcome was. So for society, the plan was that people would move from being the deserving poor back in Victorian days, through being a patient in the hospitals, and on eventually to be citizens. That was the idea. That's what society wanted to do. That's what we all wanted to achieve through that sort of process. For people to know that they're beautiful. There's a wonderful song written by a friend of mine who spent time with disabled people. And after experiencing that time, he came up with one song, one question. That is, am I beautiful or what? the question we all want to know the answer to, the question all children need to grow up knowing the answer to. And that's true whether you're disabled or not. Disabled and beautiful, absolutely. That's what we're working towards, and I believe that's what society wanted out of these changes. Then the wider system. What were we as a wider group of people that were working in the system around people with disabilities looking to achieve? Well, it was the change in relationship. It was the shift where the relationship is driven by the person receiving support, not by the people that are providing the support. People are hoping to be living in the community as well. And also, it won't happen here. The idea that people would be safe in this new, away from the hospitals, away from having that kind of inward-looking support, that people would be safe. And then the institution would close properly in community settings because people's work, home and play would happen in different places. And that keeps people safer. In the total institutions, people had to live and to work and to play, and everything happened in one place. And the idea of the new services was that people would separate those things and have different places to go and different people to be with. For families and supporters, they would have a different role. No more doing to. No more doing for. I still hear, I can't believe I still hear in some supported services the phrase, will you do Malcolm this morning or will I? And you all know what I mean. You all know what that means. That means providing personal care for an individual human being who is very sensitive to how that person is in the little subtleties. Appalling language. And it tells a story. So that was supposed to stop. Sadly, it hasn't always. And for the person, new choice, new control, those sorts of things. But actually, that last one's the key for me. When I did design, I helped design this really jazzy, individual, person-centered planning, life planning system thing that a whole load of staff were going to have to do in some service. And it all looked very grand. It had lots of boxes, and it had the opportunity to make a good old collage. There was always a collage. We showed it to some people with disabilities and to some family members. And they said, yeah, it's right. They weren't that impressed, to be frank. And they said, what we want to worry about, what we care about is love and loss. Just like everyone else. We're worried about loss. We're sad when we lose. We want to be friends and lovers. That's what we want to see. Is your planning thing going to help with that? Interesting. Oh, it's gone again. There we go. Okay, so what happened with all of this? Well, lots of good things happened. People did get some improvements, as you can see. For some, there was no change. And for some, those small unkindnesses, those rough little treatments when someone's under stress got worse and worse and came to some appalling examples of gross violation. And that is what we're talking about, Laurie. We are talking about gross violations, dehumanising of people. And there were particular scandals that threw the whole system into chaos, really. What happened for families and supporters? Again, everything we planned, many good things. But largely, we couldn't solve some key problems. We couldn't solve the way that we had large staff turnover. Welcome. We couldn't solve the fact that people kept leaving. We couldn't solve the fact of abuse. And also we had people that were very defensive and were ticking boxes rather than trying to be there with people providing support. The wider system, new types of support emerged. Lots of good things happened in the wider system. It was good to see some of those things. There was no coherent model, but that didn't seem to matter too much. The funding didn't work too well, and I think that's been got right here. The difficulties, the challenges for the wider system were the fact that we then had a very large and unregulated workforce. We didn't know who was doing what, to whom, when. And that is a real issue. And also, we had scandals. Really can't get on with this thing. They said it would be easy. Here we go. Okay. Also in the wider system, because of the scandals in many ways, people didn't react with wisdom. When we had bad things happen, we didn't just stop and think all the time. What we did was what did we do? We panicked. We said, we need to change the model. Whatever we do, we change the model. We have to have this model. We have to have targets leading to that model. It's essential that everybody works in this way and that way. And everybody got very reactive, shut down the hospitals, shut down this, shut down that. Everything has to change. Rather than just, okay, let's just wait and see and understand what's gone on. And when and if things go wrong, that's what we need to do. We need to just stop and pause. In a sporting analogy, we put our foot on the ball, wait, reflect, see, and then make wise and thoughtful responses to what goes wrong, as and when it does. Wider society? Yeah, I think the attitudes were largely the same, actually. I don't think things have changed. But people wanted to know who was to blame for the wrong things that went on. People wanted to know that it wouldn't ever happen again. That was really important. And actually there was still a lot of generosity and tolerance. Now I'm reliably informed that people that collect garbage are called garbos over here, is that right? I'm not saying that right, am I? Does that sound all right? Yeah, okay. Well, this is just a quick story I want to tell you about some garbos, because one of my friends with a disability who's in a day support service that I work into, he's a great character, and the highlight of his life is when the garbage collectors come, the garbos come, okay. He loves the lorry, he loves the sound, he loves everything that goes on. He's really quite disabled, and this is the highlight of his week. We have to get ready for it, we look forward to it on the day before, we reflect on it on the day after. It's just a wonderful time. Last Christmas, okay, we kind of went out to the garbos and we gave them a kind of gift, like you do. And the garbos said, we've noticed this guy. He seems to love it when we come. He said, would he like to spend the morning with us on the lorry? Andrew could not believe this. This was the best morning of his life. I tell you, this was the best morning of his life. And I don't judge that at all. That is a fantastic morning for Andrew. And they didn't have to do that. They just thought, we recognise this. So there are good people out there. And I still see a lot of generosity and tolerance that we can build on to keep each other safe. Well, that's my hope anyway. Okay. So if we're starting again, what would we do? How am I doing for time? I'm going to look at my watch. I'm doing okay. Oh, I need to hurry up. Oh, yeah, it's about, yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so if we're starting again, 2 foundations I would put in place, okay? And this is based on the evidence that we've had up to now. Firstly, we remember why we do this. It's an old management thing, but it's a really simple management thing. Why before what before how? Don't go on straight to the what and the how without remembering why. That's what we did with the scandals. We went straight to the what. We didn't stop and think why. Let's remember why we're doing this as all these changes happen and all the reorganisation goes on. And then this stuff on the right-hand side there, that's all actually about ethics. Ethics is where you know what the right thing to do is, okay? That's all ethics means. What is the right thing to do? And ethics and ethical thinking goes back centuries, millennia in fact, into Greek thought. And we are mainly using 2 kinds of ethics, and we're confusing staff with it. We're using ethics based on principles, okay? So we're saying it's right and good that you behave in this way all the time. You do not hurt people. You do this. You treat people with respect. We have those principles. But we also promote a system of ethics based on outcomes, which is where we want good outcomes from you. We need to know that you have outcomes, pressing on outcomes. And that pushes people to think, well, we've got to get to this outcome. One outcome of hitting someone is that maybe you're quiet, at least initially. So we need to remember, you stick to your principles, and that's how you get the outcomes. You don't go another way to get your outcomes. And then there are two other approaches to ethics which really aren't used at all. The first is virtue ethics, and I'll come on to some of the virtues. That is where we help staff and the people that are providing support develop the virtues of hopefulness, of gentleness, of caringness, of empowering people. They're virtues. Yeah? And we can help with our supervision and support of staff to encourage those virtues. And then there's an approach to ethics called face-to-face. And that is, you decide what is good and right by looking and understanding the face of the other person who's affected by that. You always stay face-to-face and recognise the humanity of that person. And then you'll know the right thing to do. When you look into the eyes of a person, when you see them face-to-face, you instinctively know the right and good thing to do. So what do we do to keep the humanity, to keep people knowing and looking into the face of the people affected by the decisions and the actions that they're taking? And that's true of those of us that are in leadership and those of us that are doing operational management and all those sorts of things. When are we face to face? That helps us know what to do. Okay, more evidence. Now the evidence I'm presenting here is evidence not just from disability services. We've got to look outside sometimes, you know. We've got to learn from the rest of the world. This is evidence from people that have, in chemical factories, put poison into rivers, or who've lied about the emissions of cars, as well as people in healthcare and social care settings that have made mistakes, okay? And sometimes it's helpful to see that what happens is it's rarely a single thing that goes wrong. There's rarely a single thing that happens. What happens is that a number of situations all come together. That if it's like the holes in Swiss cheese all lining up, and that's when things go wrong. When the holes line up in Swiss cheese, when little things and one small thing could change that. So, what can go wrong? Well, it could be that we have individuals that go wrong, that we have bad apples. We could have that the things that we're asking people to do, they don't recognise that it is wrong, bad cases. Or it could be that we are providing bad barrels, okay? And people have researched those three levels, and this is what they found. So, is as individuals who might make a good ethical choice. They tend to be people that can understand moral issues and can think about them and can reason about them. They tend to be idealists rather than relativists. So these are people that are saying, you never do harm. Come what may, you don't do harm. You don't do harm as a means to an end. It's not ever right to do harm. People that think like that. People also tend to, according to the evidence, don't just plan up to being abusive. It can be an impulse. It can just happen very quickly, very suddenly. And we need to be wary of that. We need the environments that stop that happening, stop the impulses. Machiavellian people who want to get their own way, it's a bit obvious. Locus of control is where people see external or internal events controlling their lives. Some people tend to think my life's controlled mainly by external things. Some people think I've got more control over what happens in my life. And it's the external people who are more likely to be unethical. And it's the internal people, the people that have got a solid base, that make ethical choices. And people that are happy in their work are more likely than people that hate their work to make an ethical choice? Can you start seeing some of the things that we can do here in terms of selecting and encouraging people? These are the virtues that tend to provide people with the facility to make good ethical choices. Being able to anticipate, being ready for what might happen, being flexible, able to adapt. I love that humility. Half time, it says up there. I'm doing all right, aren't I? This is good. Okay. These virtues have been key in people displaying those sorts of virtues. The people that are much more likely to make good ethical decisions, to know what the right thing to do is. Okay. So those are the individuals. What about the teams? Well, we've got to remember that a team is a much safer thing than an individual. Okay, so if the team's working well, the individual is much more likely to work well. So we need to be having ethical teams. And we can't just assume that people will do the right thing in the team. Okay? And these studies, these are standard team tasks. So this is things like, these are standard cleaning rotas in hospitals and things like that. Really things that everybody should be doing every day. In some studies, up to a third missed. And it multiplies the error if the team's not working properly. So what are we doing to make the team a safe team? Key questions. Then the case, and this is a bit complicated, but if I try to explain, okay, people are more likely to do something bad to somebody else if they think that it's really not that bad after all, okay? If they think that the person might really not be that affected, okay? So this person with a disability doesn't really know if I'm just treating them a bit rough when I'm helping them get ready in the morning, because they don't notice that sort of thing. They don't, yeah, so that sort of is, how are we giving that message that actually everything you do is really important? How are we giving the message that it is really harmful? Just as harmful is the thing that you were saying at the beginning. Would I want that? Would I want that to happen to me or a person I loved? Using that. Okay? So, the barrel. So this is the wider systems and organisations. What's the evidence shown us about keeping safe in the wider systems and organisations? Well, one of the first things is that when the scandals appeared, the organisations, probably quite genuinely actually, had no idea. Every organisation that's been involved in this has been genuinely surprised. Certainly the leadership of that organisation has been genuinely, they've had the odd worry, but they've been genuinely surprised. Okay? So we're going to think about that. And also, we've learned from evidence, again in lots of different settings, that culture, climate and leadership are important. Hey, there's a surprise. But actually we know a lot more than that about what kinds of culture and what kind of leadership. So we go on to that. Okay. So the first thing around the we didn't know is that we have finally begun to realise that people are experts in their own experiences. Okay. People know what's going on in the service. People know how it feels when someone is with them, touching them. Everybody knows that. They're the first to notice. There's a lovely quote about old people's services, because a lot of this work has been done there as well, about somebody wearing someone else's jumper. How often does that happen? Who knows when that happens? Okay, so we didn't know. So we do? We need to listen. Okay. Also about listening is that people probably don't, and I'm really pleased to see this thing about complaints and saying it's okay to complain. I think that's a brilliant initiative. People won't fill in forms naturally. People don't want to challenge directly. And in a study, they talked about doctors. This is doctors and nurses not washing their hands. You would have thought that, if the doctor's not washing his hands before, or her hands, before doing something to me, I might say something. Well, only 37% of people said they would. And only 5% actually said something. So we've got to be really careful about how we listen to people as a result of that. Then I'm going to tell you very quickly about some research that we did in Hull, where we talked to people that had visited services that were later found to be abusive, okay? And those people, when they visited services, they had a sense that something was wrong. So we interviewed them and we talked to them about it. And we came up with indicators that saying, actually, these little things all together, they may only be small in themselves, but together they can make a picture, a profile which suggests this place is at risk of being abusive. And these are some of the indicators. They noticed little things about the management and leadership. I'm going to rush through these because we're doing those in the workshop this afternoon, and they'll be on the slides for you to have a look at when you want to look at them in more detail. They noticed things about staff competency and capability. People notice things that actually the true experts in a service know something is going on and are often distressed by that. And there usually are changes in the way that people communicate and the way that people behave. Pretty well every place was isolated, sometimes geographically, but actually quite often just isolating itself. The planning was not right, and also the simple quality. The place often smelt, okay? And you couldn't really kind of make sort of a big issue of that, but actually it was a sign. And what we've done is just put those together in a simple form kind of thing, which you can use to kind of gather the small things that give you an overall picture. And people have found that helpful in seeing where is this place risky. When you've got a lot of things appearing in all of those boxes, then you think, okay, what's going on there? Other evidence about the systems that we've got around people, the organisations. Okay, climate, the organisational climate, really important. It's not too much of a problem if people just encourage personal development and people getting on and being ambitious. That isn't the particular thing that leads to difficult situations. What really helps, though, is if individuals see this as an organisation that cares. Not just one that says it cares. Every organisation says it cares. But they see the one, they think this organisation cares about people and the wider community. And then that they think this organisation has got principles and it sticks to them. And if the workers in those services are all thinking that about their organisation, that will be a much safer place to be supported in. Culturally, so this is about what people think is the culture. This is where people are thinking, actually, everybody in this organisation seems to kind of promote the organisation's values. Whether it's the finance somebody or everybody there is promoting the values. And everything seems to be designed not to just achieve bottom lines, but actually to achieve good support. Okay? So ethical behaviour is, if somebody does something right, is that recognised? There's a wonderful old paper that's still, I think, really relevant today, which is how to catch your staff doing something right. Yeah, absolutely. Really good. Is ethical behaviour really encouraged and celebrated? Code of conduct's great, waste of time if you don't enforce them. So having a code of conduct on the wall is not going to keep anybody safe. If it's enforced and genuinely part of the life of the service, yes it is. So what's the outcome of all of that? Well, we've had it already actually. I'm not sure I needed to bother. You listen to people. Listen to families, listen to people, listen to teams, listen to the service. Pay attention to the climate and culture. And in case we haven't got that, we can't rely on the service or anybody in the service just not making mistakes. If there's anybody here that hasn't made a mistake, then they're great. I don't believe them either. Okay. And also, preventing errors. This is a long time ago, we already knew this. If we're working just on blame, discipline, and training, which is very interesting, if we rely on those things, doomed to failure. These things have to be followed up with the culture, the climate, the presence of managers, and all sorts. Okay. So, first things that we need to do, we need to listen to people on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. And we really need to learn to listen to the people who love the person. Okay? So this is about friends and families, particularly about families. I think we have some complicated relationships between services and families sometimes, and I don't think that's helpful. And I think we need to work on that. And I think it's our responsibility, those of us as service providers and involved in services, to do that work. Because no one else loves the person. I know love's complicated sometimes, but no one else loves the person in that way. And therefore we need to recognise that and make different kinds of relationships to be able to listen. Can we keep from picking bad apples? Well, look, you saw the list. There are some things that we can assess there. Yeah? Not by demographic. Gender, age, education, not an issue particularly. But we can select people more likely to be ethical. How can we look after teams? I think we can do a lot of work to develop virtue ethics, to work ways of enabling people to keep their virtues that they came with. Most people come wanting to do a good thing. Most people are hopeful, gentle, wanting to make a difference. So we need to find ways through, mainly, I think, through supervision and support, to keep those virtues alive. Supervision, I think, is woeful. Certainly in the UK, it's woeful. It's normally about telling people what to do and setting objectives. That is not supervision. Supervision that's operational management, something else. Supervision is about when a person can learn to come and say how they're feeling about their work and the support that they're giving. Can say about stuff that's going on in their own lives that might be affecting the care that they're providing and the support that they're providing. Supervision is a place where they can talk about something that might remind them of something that happened in their own life that has upset them and is making them less likely to be providing good support or more likely to be providing good support. Supervision is a place where you can come and talk and be yourself. How many of our frontline support workers have that opportunity? And then be clear. Remember those teams that only 30% of the core task. We ask way too much of people, especially in group settings. If we've got care, I've seen care plans, I've seen care files 84 pages long. How can a support worker remember anything in that? Quite impossible. I've seen people, and very often people have 6 or 7 central parts of a care plan that they're supposed to be implementing. So if you're supporting up to 4 people, that's 28 things to remember at any one time. Completely impossible. That can't be done. There's a lot of evidence about how the fact that care plans don't get implemented, and it's not because the staff are rubbish, it's because it's impossible. So can we be a bit clearer, make it simpler, and encourage that virtue of knowing on the basis of the essence of the care plan what the right thing to do is. Clarity and communication. Then making it face-to-face. So this is where we reaffirm all the time the importance, the crucial importance of recognising how harmful it is, even the smallest unkindness, never mind the serious violation. Okay. And how do we do it with the culture? Well, funnily enough, culture is key, but the evidence is that the way to work towards a good culture is by thinking about being benevolent and principled as an organisation. Okay? That's the way to establish the good culture, is where everybody recognises that this is an organisation that cares, and this is an organisation that has principles and follows them through. That seems to be crucial. And that then in turn creates the culture. That's what the statistics showed in all of that evidence, which is really interesting because it actually makes it quite simple for us to think about what to do. Okay, I've nearly finished. But I do just want to say one thing. Perhaps it's because I'm a psychologist and I get a lot of referrals, and I'm involved a lot in restrictive practice. I've learned something in the last day or two about that here as well, which is I'm going to tell you about as well. Okay. So we still, in some form or other, seem to intervene in restrictive ways. We still seem to prescribe medication that isn't designed for the thing that we're prescribing it for. We still seem to have to intervene physically sometimes. Sometimes we have to kind of stop people going into places. Somebody talked about that being, sometimes we still delegate responsibility for a relationship to a door. Which I think that's a really interesting thing. How do we do that? Okay. In the UK, it's still a massive issue. That's an NHS trust, a health service trust. 38 instances in one, 3,000 in another. So it's very varied. And it was still, in the UK, used over 3,000 times. And that was in 2012. I've no reason to think it's different now. People interviewed 930 children and adults with disabilities. Over a third had the experience of being restrained. Around a fifth had been secluded, and a quarter given PRN medication. So that's medication you get instantly when you're distressed. Having a behaviour plan, interestingly, didn't help. As far back as 1840, people were doing something about this. People in a hospital, I think it was in York, near us, where I live, actually said, that's enough, we're not doing this anymore. And they moved these terrible contraptions out. But still, we're still doing it. And what I want to stress is it's the variation. It doesn't have to happen everywhere, and it doesn't seem to have to happen with everyone. So that starts you thinking, saying, well, therefore, does it have to happen at all? In a great paper, somebody said, that's enough talking about this. We just need to stop it. We actually just need to stop this. We know, and I like that, it's the safe elimination of this. And it can be done. And places have done it. I'm understanding that quite a lot of progress is being made here. This is the way that it's been done elsewhere. Okay? Firstly, gathering information. We need to know that it's happening. We need to know whether it's happening and how often it's happening, with a view to reducing it, not just with a view to counting it, but with a view to reducing it. Then with training and presence, not just training. Not just training on its own. Training on its own rarely works. It has to be followed up in practice with people there. It often helps to have a team of supporters, not to de-skill frontline workers, but to encourage and enable frontline workers. And then a system to learn. Always a system to learn. Every time it happens, it's serious. That's the point. Every time it happens, it's serious. Okay. In one setting, and this is in the US that this was done, they implemented that system, and there's quite a lot of detail on how they did it. And look at that figure of reduction. 99.4% decrease of the use of physical restraint in that case. And of course, it's better for everyone. It is not good for a member of staff to restrain somebody. There's quite a lot of evidence now that it actually is a pretty traumatic thing to do. There's some lovely papers that have talked to staff about how that happens. I just want to go back just on that. I gather, and I've been, I need to apologise really because I hadn't picked up on this, but I gather there's been some fantastic work going on around this very issue in Victoria. And I'm encouraged by that, and I would hope that that's grasped by everybody, and that continues. And I'm certainly looking to find out about the results of that over the next few days, actually. I'm looking at Anthony there. He's going to introduce me to some people that can help me understand how that's going, because wherever it's so crucial, we must move away from doing that to people. Okay, so the message we've had all morning, I think, so far, and it's not even coffee time yet. Coffee time is nearly there. We listen to people, we listen to teams, we listen to the services that we provide, and we work on that climate and culture above all, particularly that climate. Be caring, be principled, and stick to the principles. Okay, now I'll stop. Okay. Okay, yeah.
What's that mean?
Do I want to read these questions out and work through them until... No, actually. No, I do. No, I do. No, I'll be honest. No, I do. I definitely do. Yeah, okay. Now, half the people I've been with today, or yesterday particularly, had to put their glasses on to read something. I have to take mine off. So you're going to go a blur now, but I'm going to be able to read these questions, which seems important. Okay. Good examples of supervision practice when an organisation has a lot of staff that work remotely or rurally and the head office is city-based. I think what I have seen, and I haven't seen the exact thing of this that you're driving at, but what I have seen is that you can teach people to supervise each other. So supervision isn't only something that can be done in a very highly skilled sitting. I think it can be done in groups, and I think it can be done where people support each other. But in the end, those logistical challenges do, I think, have to be met. I think people have to have some presence out there somehow, and I think that has to be built into the model. I know that the rural challenges are huge in Australia, certainly around in Shropshire, where it's tiny by comparison. But certainly that is an issue. But I think it has to be a priority, and certainly in one of the best services around in Shropshire that I'm aware of, they do insist that people come in on a regular basis for some face-to-face contact, because face-to-face stuff is seen as key for staff as much as it is for the people that are being supported. I don't know if that helps. Oh, it's gone dead now. Slide to unlock. Here we go. Oh, and we're back. Okay. How can we recruit and retain good staff? Really? How do we test for ethics and integrity in some way? Well, I think people have begun to think about this, about having the sorts of... what we can do is we can give people ethical dilemmas in our assessments. What would you do if you... Not what would you do, necessarily, but you can actually present an ethical dilemma of a person, and not a really obvious one. You see someone hitting someone else, what are you going to do? I'm going to report it. But you're saying, you noticed that somebody was upset about something, and then that they were a little bit rough with the person that they were supporting, or something like that. But begin to construct some ethical dilemmas, I think, can be done. There are tests of things like locus of control. There are tests which is about whether you think external or internal events are influencing your life. So there are some assessments that you can also use. Now, I recognise that staff turnover is quick, and sometimes you've got to get people in, and all of that goes on with that. And I think the other thing is it's essential, and I trust that it happens now, is that it's essential that people that are being supported, people with disabilities, are involved in the selection procedure. Because my sense is that people tend to pick those things up. And when I've been unsure about members of staff and what's been going on and whether to select and who to select, I've found the wisdom and the ability to cut through from people that use services and family members have been pretty helpful. I don't know if that helps. There's a comment. It's a sad world where we have frameworks and models just to make sure people don't hurt other people. Yeah. I think one of the messages of what I've been saying today has been actually the frameworks and models are kind of there, but the most important thing is the relationships that we have with each other, that's actually what keeps us all safe. I mean, I imagine everyone here has done something that they aren't very proud of. I certainly have done a lot of things, and I know that I've got potential to do a lot of bad things, actually. But what keeps me right are other people and relationships I have. And not a model, necessarily, not a framework. What keeps me right are the relationships I have. In another world of that's another. She's great with her signs. We like her. In another world, when we're talking about people who commit crimes and are trying to stop committing crimes, which is some of my work in the clinical setting, what people talk about is a compelling reason. What people need is a compelling reason to change. And a compelling reason is usually a relationship with somebody. It could be a manager, it could be a leader, it could be it certainly should be the person that is being supported and their family. Okay. Oh, someone's, yeah, the relationships with families, what the question is here is sometimes there is conflict between the person and the family, with the family being reluctant to facilitate independence. Is it similar in the UK, and how is it managed? It's a huge issue, this. And what happens is that people get into corners, okay? So yes, families, we'll be talking about this a little bit this afternoon. Families are often very worried. Okay, and also families can be people that constrain. We've all had that experience, perhaps. Families are complicated things, and the only examples I've seen where we've been able to kind of work around that is where we've opened that discussion rather than get into opposition. So where we've listened to the concerns and we've welcomed the concerns of people, rather than we just saying, well, that family, they just don't really care in the same. When services get into the we know best, okay, that's when things go wrong for me with families. When services encourage the person to have some conversation with their family and to facilitate that, can be in a questioning, curious, can think about breaking it down and pacing things a little bit, and keep that respect for the people that love this person going, even when we disagree, strikes me as being crucial. Okay, I reckon I've got one more now. I'm just going to read the next one, which is, how has the changing profile of the disability workforce impacted on safeguards in the system? I think mixed, actually. I think it's been mixed. I think we do know a lot more about what's going on out there. And I think people are more ready to and unable to use systems of reporting and alerting. I think people have been spooked into that rather than have just felt a responsibility, but I think that has got better. The workforce. I'm not really sure what else to say about that. It's time, but I feel I just want to say something about. I think that the workforce is a major source of opportunity and hope for us. I think by and large, I have met many, many, many more fantastic support workers who do a really wonderful job than I've met the crass, unkind and short support workers. And so I think there's a lot of grounds for hope with that if we're smart with it. And I think that overall the workforce is developing better and keeping people safer, actually. Yeah, I do think, I wanted not to say that without thinking about it, but no, I want to say that. And I want to thank you once again for listening and putting up with all of that talking and for these amazing questions, actually. So thanks very much, and I'll stop there.